Today should be considered the most important topic in all the topics in Judaism. Of course, we are going to go directly to the fourth commandment. We are in that season in which we are studying the 10 commandments. Remember, the first commandment was Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, which means, and according to Maimonides, it is the first commandment of Emunah, that we have to believe that there is a God, and that this God is the God who liberated us from Egypt. That's the first commandment. To extract from our mind that there can be any other God. There is no such a thing. And that's a commandment. Even though it appears to us as a statement. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God. And yet we regard it as a commandment that goes with us with every other commandment. Even the commandment of not to murder, lo tirtzach, one of the 10 commandments, must be associated with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God. Which means that even though most people don't have the tendency to kill, still the Jewish people abides by the fact that we do not kill, not because we don't like to kill, which is true also, not because it's cruel to kill, but it's primarily because God forbade us to do so. And the second commandment was, Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. You should not have any other God in front of me. Which means, so during his so-called existence, God is eternal, and he occupies every space of the world, of the universe. And God says in the second commandment, you shouldn't have any other God, knowing that history is going to show that mankind is going to be permeated, steeped to the neck with avodah zarah, with idol worshipping of other gods. Knowing that, God warned the Jewish people, you are different, and I will not forgive you if you go to other gods, even if you take me with you, as long as you take other gods. I am a jealous God, El Kanna. Kanna means jealous, which means, of course, jealous. Not in the same understanding that we know it between people, but regarding God, it means that God will not tolerate the fact that his nation, the chosen nation, should believe in any other nonsense. And that's why it came as the second commandment. And then we studied last week the third commandment, which is Lo tisah shem Hashem Elokecha lashav. Do not bear the name of God in vain, which we interpreted in many ways, and one of the ways is that to always honor God, honoring his name. His name means him. And how do we honor him? By being careful how we utter his name, that it shouldn't be unnecessary. Even when we recite a benediction, and that benediction was not necessary, such as if you already said the blessing on an apple, and then before you ate the apple you said again the blessing, it's a sin. Why? You have repeated twice unnecessarily the name of God. And that would be transgressing the third commandment. And why is that? Because God demands not only to recognize him as the sole God, but also to honor him, to honor his name. Of course, with everything that goes with it, knowing that there are so many laws that relate to each one of these commandments. As we have mentioned in the very beginning, that the 10 commandments are not separated from the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. They are only considered 10 foundations from which many branches, which means separate mitzvot, precepts, appear in the Torah. And now we come to the 4th commandment, which has to do also with God. You see, remember you saw in a movie or you saw in the tablets, the 10 commandments, they appear to be like 2 tablets. In fact, the Torah mentions them as 2 tablets. The truth is, it's not one board that is with such design as everybody knows it, but in fact 2 tablets, one Moses carried on the right shoulder and one on the left shoulder. That's how he appeared. So that means those 10 commandments are fragmented with a small separation, with a distinction. And the distinction is that the first 5 commandments seem to be completely relating to God. Those are the mitzvot that we call between us and God. And then the other 5 commandments that we will be studying in the next weeks have to do with people, with our fellow men, such as do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery, which is a kind of stealing, do not covet, and so forth. So you see that the first 5 relate to God Himself, as we are going to explain. So far, the 3 commandments that we have learned are relating to God directly. You understand that? But the second part of the 10 commandments have to do with our relationship between one and another, society, the laws of society. That even without God, it's possible that people would establish laws such as the laws of society, not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, and so forth. Our project tonight is to study the 4th commandment, which relate also to God in a way that is extraordinary. It has to do with our action, no question about it, but it has to do solely with the Almighty God. There is one day a week. God created the world in 6 days. Why 6 days? Because there is, even for God, there was an obligation to rest on the 7th. You understand that? That's why He created the world in 6 days. Because He has to rest on the 7th. And that's the day of Shabbat. And we are going to learn that it has to do with God. Because the Torah calls the Shabbat, Shabbat Lashem Elokecha. The Sabbath belongs to God entirely. And He gave it to us to observe it properly, to enjoy it. As we are going to study, we are going to see that the main observance of the Sabbath is practically to enjoy it. The only thing is that enjoying something means literally enjoying. You know, people, they love to work. But that is something that comes out of necessity. Sometimes the boss imposes upon you to take a day of vacation. Sometimes it annoys you. I don't want any vacation, I have too much work. Take those 2 days and go to Miami and rest, then come back. It happens many times. God said, I want you to enjoy in my day. And don't tell me you are going to enjoy by working. You cannot work. Because that's not enjoying yourself. I want you to rest. The problem is that we have to discuss is what is rest. In the eyes of the beholder, rest could mean many things. It would mean just sitting at home and watching a baseball game in television the whole day. For some people that might be right, but Hashem knows what's better for us. He created the world in 6 days. Shabbat, it says in the Torah, in the very beginning of the Torah, ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם, ויחל אלוקים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה. And God concluded his work on the 7th day in the world that he made. ויברך אלוקים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו. And God blessed that day. We will also talk about the nature of that blessing. ויקדש אותו, and he sanctified it. And these words, by the way, that I am quoting from the text of the Torah that appears in the first chapter of the Torah, is the Kiddush, is the text of the Kiddush that I am sure everyone reads on Friday night, and in a smaller version on Shabbat morning after prayer. ויברך אלוקים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו. And why is that? The Torah says, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוקים לעשות. Because on that day God rested, and when we say God rests, you have to understand, God does not rest. There was such a question. If God rests, then how come there is still rain on Shabbat? Since rain is the doing of God, it's the work of God. And if there is rain on Shabbat, that means He's working. So we understand that there is no such a thing as God resting. You know what it means? The Kabbalists say that by the fact that God stopped working, so to speak, our sages said a phenomenal statement for us. Dibra Torah kilshon bnei Adam. The Torah talks the language of people. Which means we have to read things that we can understand as human beings. So that's why the Torah must present it to us in the form of God rested. It's not that God is resting or God is working. There is no such a thing as God working. It says in the very beginning of the creation, Vayomer Elokim yehi or, vayhi or. And God said, let light be, and there was light. If you want, call it work. But that's not work. So why do we say that He rested from all His work? Because it is important for us to read things that we, as human beings, can understand. We understand only the human way. You stop working, that means you rest. So, we refer to God also in the same manner. But chas v'shalom, God forbid that we should think that God is taking a hammer and working. There is no such a thing. The Maimonides, in a certain place, Rambam says, the same thing also in some of the quotations that we read in the Torah. Like for example, it says, Vayar Israel et hayad gedolah. This is a pasuk, this is a verse that's brought in the book of Shemot, right before the splitting of the sea. Vayar Israel et hayad gedolah. And Israel saw the great hand of God. The hand of God. Does God have a hand? We always sing in the song of Yigdal Elokim Chai that God is not corporal. He does not have a body. So how can we say the hand of God? It's only a statement that is compatible with our understanding as human beings. We cannot understand anything that is spiritual, even though according to the Kabbalistical teachings, our own body has a spiritual duplication, the same shape. You know that when somebody dies and he leaves his body, when Neshama leaves his body, he can still see he is in his body. And yet he sees his body, the physical body on the table, for example. There were many witnesses to that. They saw I am floating in the air with my body, and yet I am looking at my body on the table. The Zohar HaKadosh says yes, the body has a duplication. When we depart from our corporal body, we are spiritual indeed, but with the same shape, only within a different energy. The same thing also when we say Vayar Israel et hayad gedolah, and Israel saw the great hand of God, when they saw the tremendous miracle of the splitting of the sea, before they bursted with the song, the famous song, Az Yashir Moshe Uvnei Israel, that we read every Shabbat, and every day in fact. We said, Vayar Israel et hayad gedolah, and they saw the great hand. What hand? God does not have a hand. But for us to understand, in reality, more or less, in a way that we want to describe God, we give Him a hand, even though there is no such a thing as the hand of God. The hand of God is the power of God. That's what it means, the hand of God. The power of God. But we give it an illustration of a hand, because that's how human beings are made. They understand only things that they can see. The same thing also elsewhere in the Torah it says about the land of Israel, the eyes of God are upon the land of Israel from the beginning of the year and the end of the year. Perhaps I should explain this, even though it has nothing to do with our lecture tonight. But it says the eyes of God are upon the land of Israel. By the way, the land of Israel, what makes it so unusual? Why is it that it is the subject of so much jealousy and so much hatred in the world and so many wars? Because it's the land of God. Believe it or not, anyway, soon we will believe it. But the land of Israel is unusual by the fact that it is the only country in the world upon which the one in charge is God Himself. France, for example, has an angel that represents France in heaven. He takes care of France. America has an angel, probably rich and nice and beautiful and handsome. And he is in charge of America. There is an angel, there is a prince that is in charge of each and every one of the countries of the world, as well as the nations. Like the Muslim nation, they have a prince called Ishmael. Esav, I mean the nations, the Christian nations and so forth, they have also their own prince. But the land of Israel is not under the supervision of any prince but God Himself. Of course you will ask me, then how come we suffer so much in Israel if God Himself is in charge? Well, first we can discuss this some other time. And second, believe me, to be under the charge of God is not the easiest thing. Let me explain that. It says, הקדוש ברוך הוא מדקדק עם הצדיקים אפילו כחוט השערה. The Talmud says that God is very strict with the righteous people. Listen to this and understand it. God is very strict with the very righteous people, with the sincere people. Very strict to afflict them and to even punish them much more harshly than people who are sinners, people who are bad. People who are bad, the Reshaim, usually even King David could not understand this, and he said, Madua derech Reshaim tzalecha. Why is it that I see that the way of the wicked is successful? Which means that tzaddikim suffer more. The Talmud says God is very strict with the righteous people. Why is that? There is a pasuk a quotation from the Bible by the prophet Yeshaya. Usvivav nis'ara me'od. When you are around God, it is tempestuous. It is stormy. When you are very close to God, it's very stormy. It's not easy to be close to God, but it's worth it. That's the reason why the tzaddikim suffer more. They are closer to God. Therefore, they are being punished, so to speak, with every move. And if you say it's not fair, if he is righteous, on the contrary, he should... No. Because he is righteous, he should expect more strictness. That's the price to pay when you are close to God. This brings to us the question, why is it that the Jewish people suffers more than all the nations? Such an injustice is going on against the Jewish people since time immemorial until today and even today. Did you see what's her name, Condoleezza Rice, when she went to Egypt this week? What did she declare before the mob of the Muslims? She said, well, you know, Israel cannot condemn Israel. I mean, they are defending themselves against the terror, but they are using disproportionate power. What are you talking about? They are defending themselves to save their own life against terrorists that do not have the meaning of even resting a day. And you are already condemning them. And he says there should be no violence on any side. Very nice. I mean, all they have to do is to keep quiet. The Hamas people, they don't, if they want quiet, if they are protesting that we are cruel, Holocaust, they say. Holocaust. You know, you read the paper, you know, the Holocaust, they say. What Holocaust? Keep quiet and nothing will happen to you. You keep bombarding our cities, killing our citizen, and you are even protesting the way we defend ourselves. But when you see that even America is practically, it's not, the injustice vis-a-vis the Jew is unbelievable. But you know what? It is so cruel. So cruel. Every Jew has the anxiety why they are so cruel against us. Why is it that we are so distinguished? Why is it that we are so easy to condemn? I mean, people who went through the Holocaust, they should not. They deserve to rest a little, no? And yet we did not rest even a day. One day. Even us who are in America, we have the anxiety vis-a-vis our brethren in Israel. So why is that? It's very simple. And the world knows it. It's not easy to be a Jew. But it is very costly to be a Jew. Because you know, by being a Jew, you are going to attract the resentment, the jealousy, the hatred of the world. But it's worth it. Same thing with the tzaddikim. If you have any question on what I am saying now, go ahead, ask me. But I repeat what I say. It's not easy to be a Jew, but it's worth it. It's not easy to be a tzaddik. I told you, to be a tzaddik is very stormy. You are close to God, but it's worth it. For what's waiting for him. For what's waiting for the Jewish people. The same thing also with the land of Israel. The land of Israel is what? It's the land of God. So many wars, so many terrible things happen there. It's not fair. Yes, it's very not fair. But it's worth it. We have the land of Israel. You know, some people say, couldn't they give us a little land which has, like Qatar, like Kuwait, like to have a little more oil. Well, to have oil means that you are going to be very rich. But is it worth it? No, it's not worth it. But that's another. I see. I'm again, as usual. I ran away. I ran to other things. We have to come back to our lesson, Shabbat. But it relates to what we say. Not easy to be a Jew, but it's worth it. We say, "Ashrenu matov chelkenu Uma na'im goralenu. It's a prayer that we say every morning. How happy we are. How great is our lot. How lucky we are when we wake up in the morning and find out that we are Jews. It's so great to be a Jew. Of course it's not easy, because when you are close to God, and the Jew is closer to God, when you are closer to God, expect problems, expect storms. There is no such a thing that you are close to God, and yet you could be corrupt, and you could be this, and you could enjoy yourself very forbidden pleasures and so forth, and eat whatever you want, and go whenever you want, when you have no limit as to which day I go, which day I cannot. Not easy to be a Jew, but it is a privilege to be a Jew. As I said once, to be a king is not easy to be a king, because a king has many limitations. He cannot, even in the midst of the biggest heat, the warmest day, he still has to appear with all his attire. He cannot go with an open shirt. Talking about the kings of then. But was there any king who relinquished his kingship, his royalty, just because it's not easy? They know that it's very difficult to be the president of America. And all you have to do is watch the anxiety that they are going through. Poor, what's her name? Hillary Clinton. I would not give my place for her for any price. And yet she would give her life for it, knowing that what's waiting for her if she becomes the president, she's going to have the toughest job. I don't know if that's the time now for Hillary to be the president. But don't ask me about the other guy. I tell you the truth. Hashem Yerachem. May God have mercy on the world. Because the world is going to, on such speed suddenly, remember, there is a great speed, a sudden speed that is going on in the world, how the world is advancing towards the goal of the world. I don't know what to tell you. Let's hope to at least conclude the year 2008 quietly. I think it's going to be stormy. Today my daughter from Jerusalem told me that the Kabbalist in Jerusalem said that this year, even this month, might be ferocious, might be very stormy. I prefer to use stormy to say what they said exactly, just in case. The situation is very hard, but it makes it very interesting to see the whole world against you. You are so special, my goodness. So special, to quote a priest, Christian priest. He says, I can't believe it, how I love the Jewish people. I just heard the priest saying this. Not all priests, maybe 1 in a million. I love the Jewish people. It's just fascinating to see such a small nation, such a brilliant nation, so successful and yet so hated, and yet so difficult to be a Jew. It's so glorious to be a Jew. One of the reasons why our glory is great for being Jews is because we have the day of God given to us as a gift. Shabbat Lashem Elokecha. There is one day in every 7 days that belongs to God. And He gave it to us as a gift. The Talmud says, Hashem said to Moshe, Matana achat yesh li bevet genazai v'shabbat shma. Lech vehodi'am. God said to Moses, Moshe, I have a precious gift in my treasury chest that I would like to give to my people Israel. It's called Shabbat. Go and tell them. Now we understand from this statement that is brought in the Talmud and the Midrash that Shabbat is a gift. But you have to understand something. A royal gift is not a gift to be derided or belittled. It is a gift that should be treated with the proper consideration. Shabbat is the gift of God. Look upon it as if it is a scepter of God. It is the day of God. He gave it to us. And He said, I am giving it to you with everything that I am going to explain to you tonight. And just all you have to do is respect it. It's my gift. What happens if a king, let's say if President Bush, with all his problems, but he invites you, he gives you a phone call. Wow, you know who's calling me? President Bush. You know, even though the whole year you kept insulting and saying bad things about him, but as he calls me, you fall in love with him immediately, right? President of the United States. Now, how much more will you even love him more if he invites you to his personal dinner? That's it, he got your vote, finished. You are subdued to him forever. Why? Because he's not anybody, he's the President of the United States. What about a king? If a king makes you special by giving you in front of all the world his personal scepter, his royal baton, scepter, you say thank you, of course. And of course, you are so happy that you were so honored. But then you go home, you take the scepter, and you use it to brew something that is dirty, or to a pile of garbage. You like you clear it with the scepter of the king. Anybody who would see you would say that you're nuts. And if the king himself will know about it, you're finished. He's using my personal gift to clear some pile of garbage? Unbelievable. That's exactly the way God feels with the gift that He gave us. He gave us the gift of Shabbat. We must observe it. We must observe Shabbat. Are you with me tonight?
Yes.
If it will be necessary, we will have to do a second part. But so far, we have many details and informations to deliver tonight regarding Shabbat. So the fourth commandment is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho. Remember the day of Shabbat to sanctify it. And then the Torah goes in detail in this commandment. Sheshet Yamim ta'aseh melacha. 6 days you work, on the 7th day you stop working. Ata uvincha uvitecha ve'avdecha ve'amatcha ubhemtecha ve'gerecha asher b'sharecha. You, your son, your children, your daughters, your slaves, everyone, your animals, and even the one who is a foreigner by you. We shall discuss each one of these to understand the importance of Shabbat. But now the commandment of Shabbat appears to us in the first time with Zachor. The word Zachor means remember. But you see, the Hebrew language is funny. It has many interpretations. In each word, there could be many kinds of interpretations. Zachor means to remember, lizkor. But it means also lehazkir. In Hebrew means to mention. From this our sages came up, and the first indication, the word Shabbat, is they tell us two things. Number one, Shabbat is so important that you have to remember it every day. You know how do we count the days of the week? In good Hebrew we say Yom Echad B'Shabbat, Yom Sheni B'Shabbat, Yom Shelishi B'Shabbat. We don't say Sunday, we say the first day of Shabbat, the second day, as though all the days belong to Shabbat. You know, if you prayed in the morning every morning, you would know that we recite a special chapter of the Psalms, special Mizmor, relating to that day of the week. Sunday has its special Mizmor. But before we begin reading this Mizmor, We said this is the Mizmor, this is the song that the Levites, the Leviim, used to chant in Bet HaMikdash on the first day of the week. But we don't say of the week. We say the first day of Shabbat, the second day of Shabbat, the third day of Shabbat. You know, according to the Zohar HaKadosh, the Shabbat is like a menorah of 7 branches. The middle one is the thickest and the biggest one. And you have 3 branches on the right and 3 branches on the left. The first 3 days of the week belong to last Shabbat. They still absorb their sanctity from the Shabbat before. And from Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, they absorb their light or their potential from Shabbat that's coming. So Shabbat is like a menorah, like in the middle. Standing in the middle, Shabbat is standing between the 3 days before and the 3 days after. So therefore, every day belongs to Shabbat. We are going to explain further why. Because if you have money, if you make money during the 6 days of the week, it's because of Shabbat. Do you sing the song Lecha Dodi Friday night? Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. Or if you wish another tune. What do we say? Ki hi mekor haberacha. Shabbat is the source of all the blessing. Which means the blessings that we have every day, everybody finds his parnasa. Everybody makes his money during the week. But we don't know that because of Shabbat we get this money and we get this parnasa. The sustenance that we get during the week, or rather we will call it the bracha, the blessing that we get during the week, comes only from Shabbat. If there was no Shabbat, there would be no bracha. But by the way, it says in the Zohar HaKadosh, reiterated by Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the famed Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, in his commentary on the Torah, he says, what gives the existence to the 6 days of the week is Shabbat. If the world will stop, if those Shomrei Shabbat, you know that the whole world stands on the people who keep Shabbat. Would you believe it? How much they owe religious people, you have no idea. The world and the Jews who don't keep. They owe their existence to the religious Jews. If it was not for Shabbat, there would be no existence to the world. The Zohar HaKadosh says that the only reason why we go from one week to another is because of Shabbat. Remove Shabbat, make Shabbat like any day, you will see that the world will crumble to dust, to sheer energy.
They may ask a question also, how come people that work on Shabbat, the busiest days, like discern
what do you think? I didn't think about this question.
No.
All you have to do is to wait a little,
Okay.
and we'll come to it.
Okay.
Like the Talmud says, Shfil lesefeh de haikra. All you have to do is wait till we come to the bottom of the page, and you will find the answer to your question. I have several stories to tell you that will tell you how great and how blessed is the day of Shabbat. Only, like everything else, you have to know that there is a test behind everything. One of the tests is your question. People, they work on Shabbat, they make money. Do you know what happens to this money? Or do you know what this money will mean for them? Or do you know what will result, to what will it result? You don't know. But you should know one thing. You have to believe in what our sages said. That all the blessing of the week comes only from Shabbat. Remove Shabbat, no blessing and no existence whatsoever. If there is existence to the world, it's only because of those people who still keep Shabbat. And you have to know that keeping Shabbat is not an easy thing. But for people who already are into it, they find it the greatest pleasure to do. And Shabbat does not mean only to go to synagogue on Shabbat. You have to know that Shabbat means that you cannot open your television on Shabbat. Beginning Friday evening, even before Shabbat, 1 hour and 15 minutes before Shabbat, which we will explain as Tosefet Shabbat, the additional time that we give to Shabbat, and ending with the end of Shabbat after the stars appear by at least another 72 minutes. Let's not go into Rabbeinu Tam in this case, because so far one should know that Shabbat has a certain time. We add to it some time to show our appreciation and consideration for Shabbat. And the main thing is that all week is blessed because of Shabbat. If Chaz v'Shalom, there would be nobody to keep Shabbat, the world would crumble to dust. I didn't say those words, they were said by the Zohar HaKadosh. Let's go back now to the word Zachor. We said that the reason why the Torah calls it Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, remember the day of the Shabbat, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho, for the purpose to sanctify it. How do we sanctify it? The Torah goes on and says, Sheshet Yamim ta'avod, ve'asita kol melachtecha. 6 days a week you shall work, and you have to do all your work. What does it mean? Wait a minute first. It says Sheshet Yamim ta'avod. It looks like a commandment. Pay attention to this, Malkiel. The Torah is telling me Sheshet Yamim ta'avod, which means it is an obligation to go to work. It's a commandment to go to work. And by the way, our sages said, yes, it is a mitzvah to go to work. Gedalah melacha. And don't ask me now what happens with those people who study day and night and they don't go to work. That's a different situation. But in the meantime, for normal people like you and me, there is a mitzvah to go to work every day. But that's not the real meaning of what it means here only. What it means is, Sheshet Yamim Ta'avod, apparently it has nothing to do with Shabbat. Shabbat is about rest. And here it tells me 6 days a week you have to work. It has nothing to do with Shabbat. It has to do with Shabbat. Because the reason you have work during the 6 days and the reason you have Parnasa is because of Shabbat. And that's what the Mefarshim say. V'yom ha'shvi'i Shabbat l'Hashem Elokecha. Remember, the 7th day is called Shabbat, and the Zohar HaKadosh says that one of the names of God is Shabbat. And we are going to tell you something terrific about this. L'Hashem Elokecha. Shabbat is only the day of God. Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. The warning comes, do not do any work on Shabbat. Ata uvincha uvitecha, as we have mentioned before. And why is that? Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Because during 6 days God created the heavens and earth, et hayam ve'et kol asher bam, the oceans and everything that's in there. Vayanach bayom hashvi'i. And God rested on the 7th day. Alken, therefore, berach Hashem et yom HaShabbat vayikaddeshehu. That's why God blessed the day of Shabbat and He sanctified it. Watch. It's amazing. This is the 4th commandment. But if you look in the chapter that begins the 10th commandment, you will see that this commandment appears after as the 7th. It's the 7th verse. If you count the verses from the chapter 20 in Shemot, you will see that Zachor et Yom HaShabbat comes 7. A little hint that the 7th to the 7th day. But there are many other hints. Zachor, it's also the 7th verse of this parasha. And if you count the words of that we said before, Ata, Uvincha, you, your son, your daughters, Uitecha, Avdecha, V'amatecha, you will see 7 types of creatures that are under the obligation of Shabbat, which still has to be explained. This came from Baal HaTurim, and we'll have to explain this. There are many hints to Shabbat. You know, what do we eat on Shabbat, for example? You know, it is an obligation to eat meat. Unless if meat hurts your health, you have to eat meat on Shabbat. If you are not a vegetarian, you must eat meat on Shabbat. In case if you are a vegetarian, try not to be on Shabbat. Because our sages said, En simcha ila bebasar vayayin. There is no joy except with meat and wine. And that's the reason why it is a halakha, a Jewish law that one should eat in all the 3 meals of Shabbat, meat and fish and drink wine. Fish, meat and milk. And wine. And drink wine. Those 3 things are a definite obligation. Unless if you have any health problem or something, or if you don't like meat at all, the poskim decided in their books, the halachist, that in case you hate meat, it's okay if you don't eat meat. Try to eat chicken then. The Gemara says in the Masechet Pesachim that even chicken is considered meat. But anyway, but you see that these are the things that figure on Shabbat. Let's start with wine. Wine is the first thing that as soon as we usher in the Shabbat by saying Kiddush, right? And by the way, that's the meaning of Zachor. What we said, remember, the commandment of Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, our sages said, Zochrehu ala yain. You have to mention Shabbat upon the cup of wine. And that's the reason why we do Kiddush. We usher in the Shabbat by sanctifying it, by holding a cup of wine and saying the bracha, the Kiddush. And that's called Zachor at Yom HaShabbat. Mentioning it with Zachor en Zachor ella bape. With your mouth you have to say it. So why wine? We understand why wine, because Shabbat requires happiness. You have to be happy on Shabbat. You know that if you are sad on Shabbat, you're committing a sin. It's a big sin to be on Shabbat, to be sad. To be despondent on Shabbat is a big sin. It's a big sin to be sad always, by the way. It's not only on Shabbat. But on Shabbat it's double, because it's a day of Simcha. You know, people have to be very happy on Shabbat. And I'm going to tell you why. But in the meantime, why is it wine? We understand. Why makes you happier? Agree or not? It says so in the book of Tehillim. Ve'yayin yesamach levav enosh. And the wine makes your heart happy. Of course, if you drink moderately. You know, I did tell you once that there are 4 degrees to drinking wine. In the Midrash Tanchuma. If you drink 1 cup of wine, it's only a mashal, a parable. A cup of wine makes you like a lamb, which means innocent and nothing happens. If you drink 2 cups, you become like a lion. You roar like a lion. If you drink 3 cups, you become like a monkey. But if you drink 4 cups, you become like a pig. So you see, this is a midrash, by the way, that has nothing to do with what we are saying here tonight. But just to tell you the effect of wine. Wine, and there is a Talmud in Masechet Brachot on Perek Shishi, on the 6th chapter, which describes the fact that the wine does even give you nutrition if it is drank moderately. Too much, a little bit of it is very healthy. It's also healthy for your mind. See, it has a contradictory effect. A little bit of wine enhances your memory. Too much wine makes you drunk. Automatically it attacks your memory. You understand that? Same thing also. It is nutritious when you take it moderately, in a moderate quantity. But if you take it too much, it is destructive, no question about it. But wine primarily makes you happy. It enhances your mind. So it elevates your heart. Today, science is discovering more and more about the effect of good wine. I'm not talking about sweet wine. I'm talking about the table wine, French wine, or caramel wine. Perhaps we will talk tonight about the 4 cups of Pesach soon. But first I want you to understand why wine. So because it makes us happy, so we don't need any other reason. But our sages said, Leka mide de la remiza beoraita. There is nothing that is not hinted in the Torah. Yayin. Do you know a little about the numerical values of the letters of the Hebrew?
70.
Very good. Yayin, how do we write Yayin? Yud and Nun Sofit. Yud is number 10. Another Yud is 10. That's 20. And Nun is 50. Together it's 70. In Kabbalah we don't consider the 0, never. Remove the 0 and you have 7. So Shabbat, the 7th day. Let's go to, what else do we do on Shabbat besides the wine? Fish. You have to eat fish. You know, it says in the midrash of our sages, Kol ha'ochel dag bedag zochel ledag. You know what it means? I hate to translate what I just said. Because it means if you eat fish in the fish, you will get fish. But you know what? Here is what it means. כל האוכל דג בדג. If you eat dag is fish. If you eat it on dag, which means dag is written dalet and gimal. Dalet is 4 and gimal is 3. Together again is 7. So you see fish is again number 7. So if you eat fish on the 7th day, you will be zoche, you will be meritorious to have dag, which means to be in the 7th millennium. 7th millennium is the time when the big redemption, the Mashiach, the end of this millennium. Now that's as far as fish. What about meat? We said that meat is also an obligation of Shabbat. How do we say in Hebrew meat? Basar. Everybody knows basar kasher. Basar. Bet, shin, resh. Bet is 2. Shin is 300. You know that the alphabet ends in 400. Tough. Right? So basar. Bet is 2. Shin is 300. And resh is 200. How much altogether? 502. Is it 502 or not? Again, basar, bet is 2. Shin is 300, that's 302. And resh is 200, that's 502. Remove the 0, 5 and 2 is again 7. By the way, the Mekubalim said, the Kabbalists said that you have to drink soup on Shabbat, because soup is hot, and it's not easy to get hot things on Shabbat. That's why we have the cholent, because that's the only thing that can be heated. Right? That can be warm. Otherwise you have to eat only cold cuts. So marak is good, by the way. It's good also on Saturday night, by the way. But that's a different story. Saturday night there is a statement in the Talmud in Masechet Psachim where it says that chamin b'motzai Shabbat melugma, which means hot, warm food on Motzai Shabbat. Usually nobody can eat a lot of food on Motzai Shabbat, so you drink some soup. But if it is hot, it's good because it is healthy. It brings health. Melugma means bring healthy things into your body. But on Shabbat it's also because it's hot. But it's also, how do we call in Hebrew soup? Marak. Mem, resh, kuf. Mem is 40 and resh is 200. That's 240. And kuf is 100. That's 340. Kill the 0. You have 3 and 4. 3 and 4 again is 7. What else do we do that makes Shabbat conspicuous? How do you usher in Shabbat? You light the candle. Candle. Oh. Even the farthest Jew, even people I know somebody who doesn't keep Shabbat, but when Shabbat comes, the 2 candles are very nicely lighted on the table on Shabbat. So you see, how do we call a candle on Shabbat in Hebrew? Ner. Ner. How do we write it? Nun and resh. Nun is 50, resh is 200. That's 250. Kill the 0. You have 2 and 5. 2 and 5 again is 7. That's only little hint to show you that Shabbat is not just any day. I'll tell you another one that has nothing to do with 7, but it has to do with the most important number of all the numbers of all. Let me test you. What is the greatest number of all the numbers in the world? I mean, how many numbers do we have?
13.
Oh yeah?
9.
No, we have only 9 numbers. That's all, from 1 to 9.
8.
After that, all you have to do is to add the same numbers.
9.
9, I think 9.
Very good, Mishael. It's 9. What, you don't want to say 9?
9, it belongs to yourself.
I don't care to whom it belongs.
Okay.
So what if it belongs to yourself? Let me tell you something about 9. The Zohar HaKadosh, the Holy Zohar says that Shabbat, why do we call it Shabbat? Because it's one of the names of God. Just make believe you understand what I'm saying here. Shabbat is one of the names of God. And why is that? The Zohar HaKadosh says because it is the most perfect day. The Meharsha explains why is that? Because it is like number 9. 9 is the most perfect number that you can ever find. Why? First, let me tell you the number of Shabbat. The numerical value of Shabbat is Shin. How do we write Shabbat? Shin, Bet, Taf. Shin is 300. Bet is 2, that's 302. And Taf is 400, that's the last. Together, 702. Again, remove the 0, you have 7 and 2, that's 9. And the Zohar HaKadosh says, and the Meharsha says it's like 9, the most perfect number. What makes the 9 so perfect? So now we understand that Shabbat is number 9. Never forget this. By the way, what is the worst number? 6. How do you know? It's the number of falsity, sheker. You know, sheker is a falsity. Shin, kuf, resh. Shin is 300, kuf is 100, resh is 200, together it's 600. Remove the 0, you have 6. 6 is the number of falsity. But 9 is the other side. Why is it that they appear to be the same thing? You know, 9. If you reverse 9, it will look like 6.
Sheker
And the same thing, because
Sheket and Emet are very similar.
and that's a pasuk. Sheker ve'emet nashaku. They practically embrace each other to show you that the best lie is the lie that has a little bit of truth.
Like Yaakov and Esau.
That's the worst lie, by the way.
Yaakov and Esau, they're
That's
identical
right.
twins.
All right, but since it's not our subject tonight, just to tell you that Shabbat is 702. That's number 9. So what is 9? 9 is Emet, the truth. Let's see Emet, how much is it? Aleph, Mem, Taf, right? Emet. Aleph is 1, Mem 40, and Taf is 400. 441. That's 4 and 4 and 1 is 9. So remember, always the symbol of the truth is 9. The symbol of falsity is 6. Shabbat is 9, as we have demonstrated before. 702, 7 and 2 is 9. And what makes 9 not only the number of the truth? Well, it's enough that it is the number of the truth, because Chotam HaMelech, the seal of God, is the seal of the truth. Only with it, there is no such a thing as falsity by God. Only anything that pertains to the truth, that's God. The seal, if it says in the Pasuk in Tehillim, Dover shekarim lo yikon leneged enai. If one lies, if he does not do teshuvah, he will not see the face of God. Why? The face of God does not tolerate falsity. So if we lie from time to time, let's try to make it up and try to do teshuvah for it. Because God doesn't like liars. So now, what makes 9 the most important, and as we said before, the most perfect of all the numbers? Try and multiply anything you want with 9. You will always get 9. Try any number.
9 times 9.
Let's say multiply 9 by 2.
18.
18.
1 plus 8.
1 and 8 is 9. Multiply 9 by 3.
27.
27. 2 and 7, 9. Multiply 9 by 1. It's 9. Multiply it by 8.
72.
72. 7 and 2, 9. Multiply it by 9. 81. 8 and 1 is 9. Whatever you do. What?
12. 9 times 1.
What are you talking about? 81 is, when you multiply 9 by 9, is 81. 8 and 1 is 9. What do you mean by 12?
So 9 times 12.
You want to go further? Go further. What can I say? But right now we are multiplying the numbers the only numbers that we have. I mean, the rest is only associations. So you see that 9 is you cannot do the same thing, it cannot be done with any other number. Try it, you will find it's impossible. So the Meharsha says, the number 9 is Shalem, is perfect. Exactly like Shabbat is perfect. Shabbat is the truth, and the truth is 9. And Shabbat is the truth, the highest truth of all the truth. That is the day of Shabbat. When Shabbat comes, it's the sign that there is a God. Otherwise, what?
I just multiplied 9 by like 256. It came out to 9.
Of course, everything has to be 9. Just absolutely. You can't hide. 9 will always be 9. It's amazing. Amazing. So, what was I saying? Quickly. What was I saying? So Shabbat, so the Zohar HaKadosh says Shabbat is the name of God, and it is as perfect as God is perfect. The same thing also is Shabbat. That's the perfect day. Now, people regard Shabbat as a day of rest. Okay, it's a day of rest, menucha. Who says no? I'm not saying no. But Shabbat is much more than that. Of course it's a day of rest, you cannot work. But does it mean that you have to be, maybe you stay in bed, go and snore the whole day? You are not going to do any bad to Shabbat, but you didn't gain any effect from Shabbat. I read once that there was a rabbi who did not sleep at all from Friday afternoon till Saturday night. He did not sleep. When they said to him, why? I mean, even sleeping on Shabbat is a mitzvah. Do you know that? Sleeping on Shabbat, you know, the Rashi Tevot of Shabbat, you know, the how do you call that? The name Shabbat is 3 letters. Shin, Bet, Taf. It means Shena, Beshabbat, Ta'anug. If you write this statement, you will see, Shena, sleep, begins with Shin, of Shabbat. Beshabbat, Be, of Bet of Shabbat. And Taf at the end, Ta'anuk, pleasure. That's the Taf of Shabbat. So you see, even sleeping on Shabbat is a great mitzvah if you do it Leshem Shabbat. Not if you do it because you are falling asleep. Or because you go and sleep Shabbat, taste the sweetness of Shabbat, even in the sleep of Shabbat. In fact, what we are going to reveal to you is that everything in Shabbat is much more enjoyable than any other than anything that you do during the week, except making money. Cannot make money on Shabbat. Make money, you ruin the whole thing. You ruin the whole story. And Hashem wants us to rest on Shabbat. Rest means not only to be like a zombie in your bed, but to do things that bring enjoyment to the spirit. You have to understand that we do not have only a body. We discussed this many times before. We have much more than this body. We have another entity that lives not only with us, but that is us. That's the neshama. The soul. That soul wants Shabbat. The thing is that there is another phenomenon that occurs on Shabbat. Can you tell me what is that phenomenon? What happens when Shabbat begins? As soon as Shabbat begins,
you receive the second soul.
Very good. I forgot your name. Otherwise, I would glorify it right now. There is what we call neshama yetera on Shabbat. An extra neshama we receive. And that's a literal statement made in the Talmud in Masechet Betza on page Tetva 15. You will see that God created a special soul that invades the air and comes into everyone, especially a person who is Shomer Shabbat, comes into him. To which benefit? What is the benefit that we derive from the extra soul that we get on Shabbat? Of course, the higher your level is, the more you will understand this, much beyond me. There are other tzaddikim that understand this much more. But even to our small level, we can understand this quite easily. As soon as Shabbat begins, you know what happens? I have to tell you this. I tell this, I give a lecture every Friday night in my shul. I always, since time immemorial, I spoke on Friday night about Shabbat. That's the theme of Friday night by me, Shabbat. I remember the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Shalom Messas, the late chief rabbi of Jerusalem. He told me this once, and he said to me, I tell you, I'm asking you, oh boy, what happened here? Shabbat? Let's wait. I can continue, by the way.
Yes, you can.
The problem is that the world that will see us will not, I think they will not see anything. It's okay if we wait a few minutes. Oh boy, even the last light has... Anyway, I'm sure that we will have to have a second part of Shabbat because I have so many stories, personal stories that I have to tell you, and that we have to postpone to next week till we see this phenomenon that occurred now from the effect of the great Shabbat. By the way, if it was Shabbat, we would still see a certain light. Oh, you mean I can continue?
It's a night vision.
Okay, but they will see only obscurity. They will think that Hoshech Mitzrayim has... Okay, dear audience, we apologize in case you see that some darkness has befallen us. So let me continue.
Oh, you want to continue?
We still have a few more minutes, we can continue. What was I saying?
In your show, every Shabbat.
Yes, I always speak about Shabbat.
Spirit of
You know what happens? ויאמר אלוקים יהי אור ויהי אור. I tell you the truth. It's very difficult to speak in the darkness. I know I can. Because your faces are, Baruch Hashem, so beautiful, so great. They give light. Every person has light on its own. And therefore, when you see faces, you see God. Mamash. בצלם אלוקים ברא השם את האדם. Hashem created us with His image. You have to find God in every face, every face. Did you ever ask yourself, how come in such a small superficie, which means the small, so we are not so big. It's not, we don't have miles and miles on our face. Just a small, a little ground, a little space. And yet, billions are different shape. Even the best machine in the world, if a prototype of something, you give it a prototype, it will yield the same thing. So Hashem created us. It should have been with the same face, everyone. Don't you see? How much? Don't you do this with coins? When you coin something, you have the same thing, millions of the same thing. But Hashem coined our faces in the billions, and yet everyone is different. It's not enough to raise a question, my God. This is one of the proofs of God, I'm telling you. The fact that you are so different. Everybody is different. Everybody has its own light. Everybody has his own marvel. The face of a human being is just beyond description. The face of a human being is so interesting. It's so great. If only you stop somebody, tell him, stand up. Let me just watch you. That's all. It's not boring. People's face is the most interesting thing that there is in the world. Men and women. Amazing. When it comes to women, don't look too much. But, not because anything, because of the effect, but normally people have a face, even the ugliest man has something very interesting on his face. Anyway, forget about the face. So, on Shabbat, I said forget about the face. The face has everything to do with Shabbat. It says in the Torah, we just quoted before, "Vayvarech Elokim et yom ha-shevi'i vaykadesh oto." And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. So the Talmud says, "Bameh beracho." With what did He bless it? So the Talmud says, "B'ma'or panim." With the light of the face, the illumination of the face. Now we have to tell you something. And you must agree with me, even though you don't see it, but everybody somehow knows it. When Friday evening begins, watch people. Are they the same in their face? If you know how to observe, of course, I told you that this has to do with our level. Everyone according to his level will see in accordance with his level. But those people with a high level will see much more. The face of people on Shabbat is different. It has more light. It has much more light than the other days. You don't agree with me? If you go, especially if you go to the synagogue. Of course you are going to tell me, well, that's obvious, because he's wearing the clothes of Shabbat. But watch the face. There was a recording I made for the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue once, long time ago, in which I discussed this to the best of my ability, and I told them how people looked when I was still a young man. I was just a little boy, and I used to watch people before Shabbat. My house was, I was born in a very big house, and we had a mikveh in my house. And many people came. It was a chesed that we did to the community. But anybody who wants, he could come to the mikveh on Shabbat. For men, not for women. We had a nice mikveh inside the house. And I used to watch them. They were all running to the synagogue, smelling with soap, and red-faced. Everybody was red. It's a glow. A certain glow was emanating from every face. It's easy to explain scientifically, but I want you to believe that God blessed the day of Shabbat with the light of the face. People look much more handsome on Shabbat than any other day. You don't believe me? Watch the walls of your house. Now let me ask you a question. It happens to me, even though I have a small level and everything goes according to the level, but even according to my very small level, when I enter the house, after I finish the prayers Friday night, and I go to my house is different than any other night before, during the week. I light the same lights, the same things. My wife doesn't paint the walls every week. And yet, when I go in my house on Friday night, the walls are different. The lights are brighter, much more luminous. Everything is just different. The light of everything. You don't agree? You don't agree. But that's how I feel, and that's what is written exactly. Bameh beracho b'ma'or panim, the light. You think it's only the house? Go to the street. I think, to my humble understanding, that even if I was in the desert, not knowing which day we are, when Shabbat will come, I think I will feel it is Shabbat. It is amazing. Even the sky is different on Shabbat. Even when it rains on Shabbat, the rain is also different on Shabbat than any other day. It says, Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzira. Did you ever hear this? He's a Moroccan rabbi, a great man, tzaddik, a Kabbalist, who lived approximately 150 years ago. He was a great Kabbalist. He ended up being buried in Egypt, in Mitzrayim. And the Egyptians will never relinquish his grave, because from the whole world they go once a year and all the time to his place in Demenhor. That's 3 hours from Cairo. He's also the grandfather of Baba Saleh. You heard about Baba Saleh. We do in my shul a Hilula of Baba Saleh once a year, because I have a special story with Baba Saleh, a personal story. But Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzira, great man, many books were written just telling us the stories that have the miracles that he caused. One of the great stories of Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzira is that he had to travel. In those times they traveled with caravans, that they had to cross the desert. And you have to take a caravan with many people and many truckloads with horses and things. and camels. But they were late somehow, and in the midst of their journey, Shabbat came. The rabbi says, I must stop right here in the middle of the desert. They told him, you're crazy, you will be eaten by the lions and the ferocious animals, wild animals. I cannot do, I have to rest. On Shabbat, I must stop. They all left him in the desert. They were Arabs and he traveled with them. They all continued their journey and he stayed. He took his bottle of wine, is the food that he took with him, and in the middle of the desert, right in the middle of nowhere, he sat down to receive and welcome the Shabbat. He sat down, he made a circle around him, and he sat and he started to sing and to pray for Shabbat, Lecha Dodi, and all the things. And Shabbat fell upon him like something extraordinary. And they were lions who would devour anyone, but instead they made a circle around him, they protected him until the end of Shabbat. When he himself, it sounds like a legend, a fantasy, but apparently it's repeated many times in the books, and it is a true story, that he rode one of the lions back to Egypt. And that's the story. And he says that on Shabbat, there was such light in the desert, that's unbelievable. You felt Shabbat, you could eat it. I think I told you the story that happened to me in Spain, Madrid. A few years ago, about 5 years, 6 years ago, I was invited by the richest man in Madrid, Mr. Hatchwell, Zichrono Livracha. He passed away, for a Sefer Torah, and they invited me to stay there in Madrid, in the Jewish community, to teach Torah and to give them lectures for 7 days. It was a great 7 days that have different stories that maybe I will tell you some other time. But right now I will tell you my experience of Shabbat. I arrived on Friday morning. I was very tired from a long flight, but I didn't want to sleep. I went to Madrid. I went to the city, which I discovered full of Arabs, by the way, and I went back to the hotel. The hotel was about 5 minutes from the synagogue, a big synagogue, great synagogue, but hidden from the eye outside. There's a guard outside that stands. By the way, he didn't let me go in on Shabbat morning, even though everybody in Madrid was invited because of me, but he didn't know that I am the guest of honor, so he wouldn't let me go in. So, I don't know you, he said. I said to him, Behema, I am here to serve you, the people. Until I had to wait for somebody else to come, because I went a little bit earlier. Somebody else to come to tell him, but that's our guest, let him go in. Friday evening. I was dead tired when I came back from Madrid. I still had the afternoon ahead of me. I took a bath and everything in my hotel room, and then I succumbed to such lethargy, such sleep, unbelievable. I really slept. But I made sure that before I slept, I set the alarm to be ready. In Madrid they don't pray with the beginning of Shabbat. Unfortunately, they work on Shabbat, so they come to Friday night at 7 o'clock. 7 was quite late, already night, but that's the time when they started. What can I do? And they invited everybody, big people, and so I fell asleep. And the alarm sounded enough time for me to get up and to put my clothing and everything and to dress up and go to the synagogue. But I completely lost myself in that sleep. I didn't hear any alarm, nothing. What's going to be? A big shame. Because they will come, 400 people were there that night. And I'm not there. What a shame. What a shame for my Baal Habayit, Mr. Hatchwell, the president of the community, one of the richest men in the world. Suddenly I dream while I am sleeping. I wrote this in one of my articles, believe it or not. Anyway, it's not extraordinary, just for me it is extraordinary. And by the way, when I gave the speech that night, on Friday night, to all this audience, I gave it in French. And I told them, I remember I saw many people crying. Because I said to them, I almost couldn't come tonight because I was asleep. The kind of sleep that nobody experiences quickly. It's something that has to do with the jet lag and everything. And I dream Shabbat itself is coming and telling me, get up, it's time. And I woke up from the insistence of Shabbat. It's like a living entity that is waking me and telling me, get up. I opened my eyes and I felt at that very minute, God is my witness, I felt the room is in Madrid. Madrid is a goyish place. The Barim Betelim. And yet in that room I felt Shabbat. I opened my eyes and I could practically feel Shabbat. I felt suddenly such Kedusha, such holiness, such strange feeling that invade my entrails. And I got up quickly and put my everything and I went running to the synagogue exactly at 7 when everybody was going to start Lechadodi. I'll never forget this. I wrote it in one of my writings. How Shabbat woke me up and I felt it is alive. And our sage said that Shabbat is a living entity. Unbelievable, unbelievable. If I tell you that I didn't even begin to talk about Shabbat, trust me, but I see that the time is already 10 o'clock. We have to stop somehow. So then there's no question about it that tonight we will call it the fourth commandment. The Great Shabbat, Part 1. That's all, because next time we will have to have the second part, and it will be much more fascinating than tonight. Tonight is considered just an introduction to the reality of Shabbat. Then we will discuss how everything is so beautiful on Shabbat. We said that the face is more beautiful on Shabbat. The walls of the house are more beautiful on Shabbat. The lights are bright, much brighter than any other time. But then you will find out that food also is more delicious on Shabbat than any other day. Even if you put simple food. I mean, what's cholent between you and me? Plain potatoes, and that's it. Potatoes with some beans and meat, and bye-bye. Try to eat this during the week, you will think that you are a poor man. On Shabbat, it's the most succulent, it's the most delicious food you could ever. Try to live Shabbat without it, for people who are used to it. Impossible. Because Shabbat has a special taste. You know, we will conclude tonight with a little story from the Talmud. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, 2,000 years ago, he was, by the way, the richest man in Jewish history. And he was the greatest luminary, greatest rabbi. He is the one who collected all the Mishnayot and he gave us the Talmud. Without him, we would be lost today. He was the personal friend of Caesar, of the emperor of Rome, whose name was Antonius. We call him Antoninus. He became so friendly with him that practically we know, according to our records, that this emperor converted to Judaism in secrecy. And he did a lot of favors to the Jewish people. And he built a personal tunnel from his house to the house of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, to learn from him Torah. And there are many stories in the Talmud regarding those two people, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi, whom we call just Rabbi, and the emperor of Rome. But before he converted to Judaism, before he was aware of everything that's Jewish, that fascinated him, one day he was the friend of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, businessman. You know, Rabbeinu HaKadosh was very rich, and the emperor liked to be in presence of rich people, especially if the guy is also very smart. And he saw in Rabbi the paroxysm of wisdom. So he became his friend. One day he came to visit him. And when was that? On Shabbat. And you know what is the food of Rabbeinu HaKadosh? Even though he had servants and he was like a king, but the only food that is possible is the cholent. And he had cholent. You know, you'll be surprised to hear that cholent is as ancient as I tell you. Over 2,000 years. No wonder music started now, because the cholent of Shabbat is something. So you see, my friends, he came on Shabbat And he did not, Rabbeinu HaKadosh was not prepared to welcome the emperor of Rome in his house and giving him cholent. He was ashamed. He said, Majesty, I don't know, will you eat like us? He said, yeah, sure, no problem. And they gave him cholent. And the emperor ate. And he said, that's good food. Wow, that's good food. Very nice, very good. Well, very good. End of story. Some time passed, and the emperor came again to visit the Rebbe. When was that? Wednesday or Tuesday. And he came again unannounced. And the Rebbe is not prepared for him. And the emperor said, don't worry, give me the same food that you gave me that day. This is extraordinary food, wonderful. I want the same. Majesty, the same? Oh my God, just potato. He said, go prepare potato, what can we do? That's what he wants. And then the emperor started to eat. And he ate it. He says, this is good, not bad. And he says, something is missing. He says, it's good. I'm not saying, hey, take it easy. It's good, don't worry. But something is missing. The last time that I was here, I enjoyed myself immensely. What's missing? So the rabbi says, Majesty, what can I say? There is one spice that's missing. He says, what spice? Get it. I'm the emperor. I get everything. Get it. He says, I can't. This spice is called Shabbat. Tevalin yesh lanu veShabbat shma. There's one special spice that is called Shabbat. For that you have to come on Shabbat. So imagine, here is a goy in the house of a Jew who felt Shabbat without knowing, of course, but he felt the extraordinary effect of Shabbat. I have to conclude this with another anecdote. About 15 years ago, when I bought my house in Kew Garden Hills, we hired a certain goy to do some things in my house, to paint my house and to do everything. We just bought the house. And this boy was a nice man. He was not Jewish, but he was almost going to become a priest, a Christian priest. He was learning to become a priest. But he was he was a contractor and he was doing a great job. And little by little, with the days that were passing, he was more and more interested. He kept asking me questions. In the beginning, he thought he can harass me with questions. Then he found out that I know what he knows much more than him, and that he has nowhere to go with me. But he was fascinated. He says, can I come to see you on Shabbat? Can I come to see you on Shabbat? I said to him, welcome. I forgot his name. It's not nice. He was a nice man. One Shabbat he came suddenly. And he said to me, please forgive me. He said, all I want is to watch you. I just want to watch you. To watch the great day of God, he said. I told you that even the Goyim know more than us. The Goyim know more than us the truth. But they cannot have it. It's not their gift. Shabbat is the gift of Am Israel. It's not the gift of the, it says in the Talmud, Goy Shabbat Chayav Mita. I don't want to translate this. There's a reason why. But it's not for the Goy. Goy cannot celebrate Shabbat. But can he watch? Why not? So we told him, come on. He says, I just love to watch you. He swore to me that he never felt the feeling that he felt when he was watching us just eating on Shabbat. He would not sit with us. He didn't want. But he says, let me just watch. I'm looking at something extraordinary. I have another story, personal story that happened to me in Palm Beach in Florida. That is a long story, and it will be the story for next week in Yirtzeh Hashem. That story, it's my personal experience, what Shabbat does and how miraculous is its effect on people who observe and feel. Because many people that do go through a lot of things, they don't feel, because they don't stop to feel. But if they stop to feel, they will realize that on Shabbat, it's a day that is not of this world. It is indeed the day that pertains to the other world. As the Talmud calls it, Shabbat me'en olam haba. A glimpse of the world to come is Shabbat. So we stop right here. and we will continue next week. Imir Tzeh Hashem. I hope to see all of you, at least all of you. So good night, my friends, and be well.